Hey everyone, Ryan Chadha here, and this episode is so exciting, but at the same time, it is really scary. And it's scary because most of us probably don't realize how AI is gonna hit us, and it's gonna happen much sooner than we think. And it's something that we really need to think hard about and prepare for. I think education is at a point where if it doesn't evolve and it doesn't actually look to the future, most formal education institutions are going to become meaningless. In this episode, I talked to Titash Neogi, who's co-founder of a startup called Adaptive.me. Adaptive uses AI to help people navigate the future of work. Titash has thought very deeply about AI and its impact on the future of work, and I'm sure you're gonna love this episode because a lot of what we discuss is just so out of the ordinary that we all need to think really hard about where we're headed. So I hope you enjoy this episode and let me know what you think. Enjoy the show. Welcome, everyone. So I've been hearing about developments in AI. I've watched a few videos of, and there's been this sense of like, okay, it's cool. It can drive cars and trucks, but what else? And I just kind of like sort of, didn't think of it very highly. And then last year was when I started seeing these videos on Twitter of what GPT-3 is capable of, and I was like, "Whoa, what is happening? This is absolutely insane." So Titash, thank you so much for joining. It's going to be awesome fun, and yeah, why don't you take it away?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. And thanks everybody else who's here. So I am the founder and CEO of Adaptive.me, and what we're trying to build in Adaptive is to help young people understand the changes in the future of work and get prepared for it. We call ourselves a full stack career platform, which means we take a person's basic profile and then run it through our systems and then help them get to the other side, which is hopefully find a meaningful career path. So we're pretty early in our journey, but early on, and part of my background being in AI for almost 10 years now in different ways. I've been looking at AI and OpenAI for the past 1.5 years. And long story short, a couple of months back, we got access to the APIs. And I'd already, like Ryan said, there's videos all over the internet about what OpenAI can do and what it's doing. But it's actually, when you start actually playing with it and when you start trying to build on top of it, what really hits you is not how powerful it is, but what hits more is how accurate and how simple to use it is, which is what the crux of this conversation would be. I don't want to make this a technical conversation. What I really want to talk about, because everybody here is either a parent or an educator or both, is that I think we need to wake up to the fact that we are living in a post-AI world now, and nothing is the same anymore. And we need to do some things with that information on the table. So Ryan, should I how do you want to structure that, structure the conversation?
Yeah, so I think the way we'll do it is, we'll just sort of keep it casual and conversational. And to get us started, Tatash, can you tell us a little bit about what what GPT-3 is, what a language model is, and maybe even show us, what you've been working on?
So before we go into what GPT-3 specifically is, I want to show the screenshot. I hope my screen is visible to everybody. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is a job description. A couple of days back, I wanted to hire a student researcher, and I honestly, this is a honest to truth, real experience. I was overwhelmed with work. I had OpenAI Playground running because we were working on top of it. I said, let me just go in and see if it can create a job description for me. And what you're seeing on the screen, if you pay a little attention, this is a completely coherent, completely a complete job description that OpenAI created for me in 5 seconds. It actually took me longer to put this up on LinkedIn than for OpenAI to generate this. And all I did was I just said, generate a job description for me for a student intern for a ed tech startup. That was the only information that I had to write. I did not need any technical skills. I only needed a single line of sentence, and this is what I got as a response. The reason I brought this up as the first slide is to drive home the point that this is what most of our communication will look like in the coming years, where we will not be doing the grunt work of communicating. AI will do it on our behalf. And there are implications of it. And some of us will say, oh no, and some of us will say, oh yes, but it is what it is. This is the moment in time where we will all remember and say, yeah, this is when it changed. This is where AI started taking over our mundane conversations. I have a couple of these screenshots before we delve into what GPT-3 itself is and what language models are, because it's probably interesting to know a little bit about it. To be very honest, I am not an expert in this. I am a student or a learner or somebody who just dabbles with it. But it's really interesting to understand at least the tip of it from the perspective that how does this even kind of begin to work? And then to go forward and like if you want to know more, there's a ton of information out there anyways.
So Titash, just before we go on, so I just want to make sure I understand this right. So you essentially gave this thing like a two-liner saying, I want to generate a job ad or something like that for a student, and this is what I want them to do, and it just spat it out.
Yeah, so this is the next screenshot. This is actually the screenshot of the OpenAI playground. This OpenAI is intentionally keeping the playground access only, invite only. So you have to, there's a huge queue. It took us around 8 to 10 months, I think. I mean, I literally applied for it probably as soon as they opened up for invitation. So that's probably 8 months or a year. And that's when, so we got this invitation, and this is the playground. And if you can see, Ryan, in the playground, the part that is bold is the part that I told OpenAI to do. And the rest of it is actually something that it generated for me. So there are a couple of these. So just to answer your question, this bold sentence is all I gave it. And everything else is what it generated as a response using one of the various models and then we talk about the various models and what they mean in a minute. So
great, cool.
So these are all like, I mean, at the very least, they're cool. And at its real sense, this is probably changing the future of work for a lot of people. So, you know, they're, depending on how you look at it, oh, this is cool. Or if you really think about it for a moment, this is probably taking away bread and butter for a lot of people whose job is to write content. I mean, it's that spectrum somewhere. We all fit in that spectrum somewhere. So it's not just cookie cutter content. I keep playing with it all the time, and we're building something which we'll talk about in a minute. And one of these things is I try to say, okay, let's see what it does with something that is a little bit more open-ended. And I haven't, to be honest, if you read this sentence, you will say, yeah, whatever, it's just repetitive, it's not really making sense. But think about this. I have not optimized this. I'm only looking at it from the tip of the thing. Like there are people capable of who have direct access to the language model who can actually write entire novels using this because it can write novels. And not to sort of make it more dramatic, I'm pretty sure if I trained it long enough, it would be able to spit out, I mean, I use the word spit quite loosely, but it would be able to churn out a lot more meaningful content. So for 5 seconds, this is not bad, right? Like for a machine that does not even understand and is capable of doing this tirelessly day in and day out, this is massive content generation capability at anybody's fingertips.
Yeah, that's really, really insane, actually.
Yeah. So with that kind of context in set of what it can do, let's talk about, and this is a screenshot of the OpenAI website. If you went to OpenAI right now, you'd see this. And this is February 14th, 2019. This white paper changed the world, or at least like announced. So the world had been changing long before, because before GPT-3, General Performing Transformers, third edition, there was GPT-2, which we had open source access to. And that was a model where I've actually worked on the code of that, because you could go and download the language model, you could download the data set it was trained on, and you could train it on your computer. Sure, it took a lot of work and a lot of time, but it was available. And then in 2019, February 2019, they released GPT-3, which is an enhanced version. And essentially, it was a very unassuming title: Better Language Models and Their Implications. Like, I mean, that is also a point to note, that how unassumingly technology is changing the world today. There isn't big fanfare. There isn't a lot. Like, if you are not watching literally the white paper archives on arXiv, or you're not watching certain key things, you won't even notice how technology has changed the world around you silently. Because if somebody told you, I wrote a white paper on better language models and their implications, you'd probably just say, nice, and move on. But what underlying this unassuming sentence is the simple truth that as of this date, machines started generating almost sentient conversation capabilities using pre-trained data models. So we've spoken about language models. So let's look at a very simple example of what a language model really means. And I've really tried to break it down to make it super simple, so that we all understand that the concept is really simple. It's only complicated in its execution. So basically, a language model is just a probabilistic outcome of a series of words. So, for example, the way we all look at language, eventually subconsciously, the way we learn it is we look at patterns, and we form neuron connections in our brain about, some of us, of course, go through grammar and to go through rigorous statement, but a majority of us just absorb language, and we keep understanding and hearing patterns, and then naturally form patterns. And that's exactly how GPT-3 works. It is given a lot of language patterns, and over a period of time, it starts predicting with greater and greater accuracy what, given a certain input pattern, what the most likely output pattern should be. So, for example, if a trained model given where are we will say going is most likely going to be the next word. So it's just basically a very highly trained probability machine that has been trained on so many different kinds of data points, literally trillions of data points, actually 2.75 billion data points, that it knows all possible combinations that are there, that exist in the world. And because it's a machine, it can do these things really fast. And because it's a machine, it can never tire. So therefore, given three things: probability, a large number of patterns, and the seemingly endless capability to churn through these patterns, it can start generating new content. That's pretty much what OpenAI GPT-3 is. It's a very powerful probability machine that has seen and heard and learned everything that is to see, hear, and learn in the world till date. And therefore, now it can generate new or seemingly new models of content. And I'm making this overly simplistic. It is a little bit more complex than that, but the basic concept or the basic premise is this. So that, Ryan, to your question, is what a language model is. Um, Happy to answer any specific questions on that.
But at this point, like the one thing that's coming to my mind is, so would you say that this, this model essentially, it's almost like a summary of the internet, right? Because it's been trained on the internet, and they say it's been trained on like everything that it could possibly find on the internet. So that's, that's absolutely mind-boggling, because the internet is very, 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 very large. Yeah. Okay. That's
Yeah.
pretty interesting.
So I want to bring up a couple of things on this note. So yeah, you were right. It has been trained on the internet, and specifically on the Wikipedia. So everything that is in the Wikipedia till February 24, 2019, I think the release date was February 1st. So everything that was on Wikipedia till February 1st, 2019 is something that OpenAI knows. So you can ask or expect to have information about all of that. And they're constantly updating newer models, but that's where the production model is right now. But I want to make some another interesting comment. So a couple of weeks ago, I chanced on this white paper about Wudao, and I just don't want to throw these names out there, but I have to, because this is even more powerful. So when OpenAI launched GPT-3, the Beijing Academy of Artificial Intelligence started working on, and they've been working on this for the past, started working on Wudao 2.0, which is a 10x more powerful model than OpenAI. So OpenAI is trained on roughly 2.7 billion data points or parameters. Wudao is trained on 1.75 trillion parameters. And these actually don't make any sense. These are big numbers, right? But essentially, I mean, you can say that a kid comes along in class and says, "Hey, I read all the textbooks that were to read in my curriculum." And then the next kid says, "Okay, I'll show you. You know what? I read everything there was to read in the library." It's literally that going on right now. And what does that mean? What that means is that so the Wudao model is now capable of 10x more accurate and powerful language generation. It is not only capable of language generation in English, it has also been trained in Chinese text, and therefore it is capable of generating or transforming language from one form to another, or one language to another, very seamlessly. And there are infinitely other combinations and capabilities possible, but I just wanted to kind of bring up this point that it is the knowledge in the internet, it is all the knowledge that we hold as a humanity, that we are literally putting into this machine and making it a lot more powerful than we can ever hope to be.
Yeah. So there's a question here before we move on. Who owns it?
So that's a great question, actually. So OpenAI is as the name goes, an open foundation. It is a not-for-profit organization owned by Elon Musk. I mean, if owning is not the right word, but funded by Elon Musk, Microsoft, and I think a couple of other organizations, which I don't have the names on the top, but essentially some super rich people with a lot of money, who, out of the goodness of their heart, have decided that since they can literally do anything with it, why not let some other people also try out and do some other stuff with it. That is OpenAI. So OpenAI is owned by super rich people, but kind of loaned to the rest of the humanity out of just the goodness of their heart.
Oh, that's so nice of them.
I do think that it is nice of them, because it is financially and capability-wise impossible to put together the hardware infrastructure, not just the hardware infrastructure required to build this. So I mean, honestly, the choice was, should we build this or should we not build this? And if it is built, it might as well be built by people who are willing to loan it to others.
Yeah, that's great. So just on that point, Sarvesh has asked a question which has been on my mind as well, actually. So he asked, how does a layman like me get to experience the power of GPT-3 if the wait time is 10 months?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. One is, you could be already using GPT-3 as someone who's a consumer at the other end of any application. So GPT-3 is already in production with a lot of products who have been like industry partners with OpenAI. So that's one, but that's not much, right? Because you're a consumer, so you don't really get to even realize that this is being powered by GPT-3. The other is, obviously, you just queue up and put up your email ID on OpenAI's website with a use case. So basically, what their point is that this is a really powerful tool. It cannot go out to people without a solid use case. So even for us, right, we had to put up a use case, then wait, and when we want to get into production, we have to justify where we are using it, because this is the software equivalent of a very powerful destruction weapon, because you use this tool to generate fake news, generate content, do a lot of other not interesting things. So therefore, the answer is, you have to have a business case and you have to queue up. and someone will come along, read your business case, and then say, okay, this makes sense or not sense. Mostly it is a question of time, actually. I don't think that like you could make up a business case, but it's essentially a function of time. It just is that. So
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, let's move on and then we'll sort of come to a few more questions that people have asked.
yeah, so at this point, let me delve a little bit deeper into a couple of demos that I wanted to. So one is this screen grab, and I know it's a little repetitive, but I just wanted to sort of show a couple of different things and talk about it in a bit. So so this is a screen grab again of a similar kind of thing. So I'll just quickly run through it, and while this is running, I will talk about it. So I tried to generate a job description, and we'll talk about the language models as well. And you can see as this video goes on that it's not always 100% accurate. So you have to keep tweaking it and keep trying to adjust different parameters. So you can see that I'm adjusting the parameters over there to say
Mm-hmm.
how many tokens I want, etc. And then you can, and of course all of this can be done programmatically as well, which is what we are doing. But now you can see that when I tweaked the parameter and I told the model what to do, it started generating this text.
Yeah.
And the thing about this content is that you will notice that there is almost zero grammatical inaccuracy,
Mm.
so which is remarkable. And also the thing to note is that there is almost zero sort of intervention or need for intervention. I can literally copy and paste this. So then you can build entire businesses or entire sort of use cases downstream of this, where if you have access to this, you can do so many different things. And we'll talk about the education implications of that in a minute. So that was one thing. I wanted to show the actual interface as well, because I want to talk about the language models for a minute, just to kind of give a sense of what this really means. So there are these 6 language models, and each of so this is the OpenAI playground that we have access to, and there are these 4 primary language models called Da Vinci, Curie, Babbage, and Ada, and they are all basically data sets on which OpenAI is trained. So you can choose to have, and you can see that the circle over here identifies how big or small the data set is, and they are all good for certain use cases. So these data sets, the base data sets, are where you need to give OpenAI what is known as a prompt. So you need to give a little bit more descriptive information on what you want it to do. And then based on that, it will try to use its training to repeat that. Now, that was 2019 to till now. In the last 1 month, they've launched what is known as DaVinci Instruct Beta, which is what you've been seeing, where you don't even need to train it. So if this presentation, if this conversation was happening a month ago, I would have said, yeah, there is still some work left. You have to design the prompt, and I will show you what a prompt is in a minute. And there is some art needed, there is some skill needed. It's not that simple. But a month later, they've rolled out DaVinci Instruct Beta, which is a model that doesn't even need to be trained. It just needs to be told what to do. So this is making me realize how meaningless my job as a software engineer is now, because like really, I don't really need to know anything. I just need access to this and maybe a little bit of possible English, maybe not. That's debatable too. And then I can like literally churn out whatever I want to churn out. And by the way, just bear in mind that this is not limited to language generation. You
Mm.
can train OpenAI to generate from content designs, and these are already there. So you can go on the web and look at the examples. You can generate from moods to colors. You can generate from description to code. And those of you, some of you might have heard that GitHub, which is the world's largest repository of code, has recently collaborated with OpenAI to roll out the Copilot, which is where using OpenAI language models, uh, GitHub can write, fix, assist in code. So you
Yeah.
don't need to write code. So you must have heard this. So that's also something that I wanted to sort of kind of talk about. Now, these are examples of what are generally possible. Now, let's move on to what what that means for education per se.
Yeah, we've got a couple of interesting sort of observations here.
Sure.
So one from Pratik says, I'm worried about social science content where the biases and prejudices will get more accentuated given the context and given the context and instruction that you'd probably give this thing. I remember reading about this just recently where, again, this was on Twitter. Someone basically, the prompt that was given was something about Black people and women. And it came out with something that was very racist and very sexist.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is an open debate, and it's a great comment, and it's very relevant. But we are still grappling with trying to figure out. Okay, we've developed this technology, and we are like the industry is racing to apply it into real world, and no one has time for it. It's pretty much how everything has happened in the human in our civilization, right? Like we invented railroads, we invented coal, steam, nuclear power, and science moved on without thinking of the implication to the humanity and to other. And it's exactly what is happening here. We're racing forward. There are implications of gender bias. There are implications of one thing that nobody notices and talks about, and maybe someone has asked that question or noticed, the environmental impact of training language models. And that is devastatingly huge. It takes the equivalent of one transatlantic, the fuel burned for one transatlantic flight to train one language model. So that's and we have language model training going constantly across as more and more countries, organizations, governments wake up to the fact that, oh my God, this is the next weapon. More and more is happening. So there is that. I don't have an answer. This is an open question. What do we do about gender bias? What do we do about the issues that are there in the existing knowledge that we're about, social biases? There is no answer because that's not what science typically is concerned with or technology is concerned with, right? So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, we are barely beginning to figure out the impact on the future of work and learning.
Yeah.
To be able to take a moment and say that, okay, now what do we do about the other stuff? Some organizations are working towards it, but my guess is as good as anybody else's in this room of what that's going to mean. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite, mind-boggling actually. Yeah, let's get into what your thoughts are in terms of how it's going to impact education, learning, work. You're a parent yourself, so how are you looking at the kind of education that you want to give to your child?
sure. I mean, this is something that has become a daily debate for us at Adaptive. That because I mean, literally, I wanted to have a slide saying this changes everything, but it would be too dramatic, and like I didn't want to go down that path, but it literally does. So I want to use this opportunity, and I'm talking about this, and a lot of other people like me about how there is a fundamental need to look at what is going on with the AI technologies, not just OpenAI, but the eventual certainty with which we are reaching towards artificial general intelligence, which is AI's capability to act and perform like humans. That there is an impact on all of these areas. So anything that has patterns, that is deterministic, that can be done with a series of instructions will definitely get automated. There is just no debate about it. Like unless like you have legislation that says we are not going to do software or robotic process animation, which I believe will throw us back into the dark ages. So that's not going to happen. Therefore, everything that involves any job today. So if I were a young person going in, start thinking about my career, and I tell this to a lot of young people who work with us at Adaptive, that if I'm looking at my career paths for the next 10 years, like if I'm in 11th grade, 10th grade, maybe even earlier, and thinking about careers, I'm definitely not looking at anything that does not involve skills that are innately human, which means creativity, ability to collaborate with other humans, ability to look at abstract things and break that down, because those are the only areas where AI is hopefully not going to come in, or even if it does come in, it's going to become something that still needs human intervention. There is,
Yeah.
and then there's the only other reason that you're just lucky enough to be in a government job which just did not get automated because the government didn't automate it. That's a separate thing. But we're talking about
Yeah.
large scale careers, right? Like next, so the next 10, 15, 20 years of young people are going to be determined by the fact that majority of the jobs that we know today, that we think of as careers, are no longer going to even exist for them to bring up families, have a good life, etc. So that's the implication we're looking at. So we're automatically say, like, we should automatically be saying that a lot of stuff that is being broadcasted to us, especially younger children and younger people, like, oh, do this, coding, this thing and get a job in Google, or do this content writing course, or this certification, or this digital marketing certification. Sure, 5 years, that window, you might get a job, you might even make a living, which is very, very good. But you have to look at the trajectory there, right? You have to look at your career not in terms of my next job, but as an industry, where am I going to go after this? And I feel that that is just not there. Like, people are knowingly being short sold on that front completely. So that's what we at Adaptive are hoping to sort of tackle and actively working on. Um, so I've been referring to what we do at Adaptive. So OpenAI is just one of the things that we do, but we realized, especially in the last 1.5 years, that we need to identify and train young adults for critical skill gaps, which can help them survive the age of AI. And that's what we are working on. It is really complex and hard, because we are looking at it from different angles and trying to build something where we can leverage AI to train and make people better, not automate them out. So
Mhm.
the inverse application of AI mostly, because most AI companies are about, oh, we are making these chatbots and these chatbots will do all the job. But we're actually saying, can we make a chatbot that can help people become better in their skills? So I will take this moment to sort of see if I can bring up this is still our work in progress, internal beta. And what I want to show is the direct application of OpenAI in education. And for the educators in the room, this is going to be interesting. So these quizzes, so this is an early stage application. We're still working on so these quizzes, this is meant to be a digital tools quiz, are automatically generated by OpenAI. And so you can see that it is basically asking people to choose what they think Airtable is. Airtable is a platform that helps people build no-code platforms. So these sentences are all are being generated dynamically by OpenAI. So the point I'm trying to make here is that if you think as an educator, where you can use technologies like OpenAI to do some really, really good things, is to build learning material at scale, tests at scale, that you would not humanly be able to do, and
Mhm.
help people have a gamified, engaging, upskilling experience. And that's what we are trying to do with OpenAI. So we are trying to build this system where you essentially are thrown challenges, and the challenges are generated in real time by AI, based on the OpenAI models, and they help you identify skill gaps, and then you become better in those skill gaps by training modules. So basically, I won't stay on this long. The only thing I wanted to show is that if you notice these sentences, the Canva is a cloud-based collaboration tool. Canva is an online animation development platform. Canva is a website. These are all sentences generated by OpenAI in real time. We're not doing that. What that means is that we can have hundreds of students coming in and hundreds of tests being thrown at them, and being able to identify what are the areas. Only one of these answers is right, and
Hmm.
what are the areas where they have gaps, and then train them. So we're building these things using OpenAI. We have a couple of other application areas that we're working on, which are all essentially focused on, can we do the inverse of what is the most common application of AI? Can we use AI to ask questions to humans and train them rather than make AI answer questions that humans ask? Because that's the most common application, that make Q&A agents that can answer questions. But the
Yeah.
inverse of it is make AI ask questions to humans and help humans become better. So
Yeah, that's amazing. And ties in nicely with what Sarvesh was saying. He said, exams should be to test knowledge. Exams to test knowledge retention should be made obsolete. It's the understanding of the concept that will be critical.
uh,
Um,
yeah, that's true, and that's actually a great point. I think uh, I don't think that exams will really matter. Like, of course, we can create, like, it's the same battle that, Ryan, you will identify between cryptocurrency and fiat currency, right? Like, you're just propping up fiat currency because you can prop it up, but it's really, crypto is really going to sooner or later come in. So education's having that same moment. You
yeah,
can prop up the degrees, the exams, and the entire system because everyone's putting their legislative weight behind them.
yeah,
But it's literally meaningless because anywhere you go, AI is already doing things better without even that much info, so you're actually training students on things that doesn't even need, that they don't even need as a and testing them on that. I want to come to this slide, and this is a really badly put together slide, but this I put this up because I think education is having a photo print moment right now, and I want, if anything, for all of us to take this away from this conversation, that you can not think about it, you can pretend that it doesn't exist, but this is where we stand as an industry right now. We are literally the photo and digital color labs, all of us who are part of the system of schools, colleges, degrees. If we don't start actively changing the way we are teaching, learning, training, upskilling people and guiding them, then we are basically just sitting here, and eventually we are going to be shut down and become meaningless. So this is where I want the like, this is, I think, the last slide I have. Yeah, this is the last slide. I'm happy to answer any questions or discuss anything further, but I want this picture to haunt everybody here because we're looking, this is the grim specter of education that we're looking at. So
yeah. That's a great note on which to open up to Q&A. If I can take the liberty of starting with the first question. So, I think most people are, aware that a lot of jobs that currently exist will probably be done, even if not better, but they're going to be done much faster by AI. So companies are going to be like, let me hire, AI and spend money on AI as opposed to spending money on a human. But what new jobs are you seeing coming up because this thing is going to be so pervasive?
yeah, yeah, that's a great question, and kind of makes things a little positive too, I suppose. One is AI trainers. So people who have language skills, people who have creative skills can become very good. Think about becoming AI trainers because while we have artificial general intelligence coming in, and we have very specific AI models, you would still constantly need to train AI for specific work. So even at Adaptive, for instance, we do a lot of work on the model to train it to generate the right questions, and that is not going to go away because until a relatively far away future, we will need people to have superior language skills to not write content, but to be able to tell AI how to write that content. That's one example. writing content, but AI trainers would be needed. The other is anything that needs collaboration between humans, and where the applications, and I'm not talking about high tech jobs because it doesn't make sense to me. High tech jobs are going to be in one way or the other there. So essentially in the job spectrum or the career spectrum, you have the mid tier jobs, which where I think we all at some point in our careers have been. The bulk of the careers have been in the mid tier jobs because you have like the super high tech jobs, researchers, and people at the cutting edge of every industry. That's always going to be the case. And if you are one of those really gifted individuals, then that's awesome and that's fine. But the reality is that the bulk of people fall in the mid tier, right? So in that mid tier, whether it's an engineering, coding kind of thing, that's not going to work so much unless you have very good people skills. Because
Mhm.
the human to human collaboration, the ability to absorb information from one human and then instruct an AI to do it, the ability to get AI's output and ensure that it is safe and practical, those are all innately human skills, and those won't go. So I think the World Economic Forum, and those are the skills where we are training where we are building our platform on. The World Economic Forum has identified that the new jobs that are going to be created in the next 10, 15 years are going to harness your creativity, your collaborative skills, your ability to identify and do abstract thinking, and a couple of others. So jobs like AI trainers, jobs that involve managing and working on AI related tools and technologies on the tech side, etc., will open up. I mean, there's a whole bunch of those, but essentially, more than jobs, the important thing to remember is these skills that make us inherently human are going to be more important than degrees, than how much coding capabilities or really superlative content capabilities, because those are things that AI will be able to do anyways. So
Yeah, cool. Thanks. So I think let's open up to to everyone here. So if you have a question, just unmute and ask.
Ryan, I think I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so as I typed in the chat box, so the Guardian had an article by the GPT-3, and it kind of stirred a hornet's nest among us journalists. Basically, we realized that our jobs could be under threat. So just wanted to ask for writers, especially, and people who are creators of content. I mean, not just content creators, but people who are authors and people who, bank on a lot of creativity. Can this be a threat at all? I mean, where do things stand with us? Because the way I see it, I think that one thing that can't be replaced is my ability to connect things across industries, sort of to make connections. I think that possibly can't. But can you tell me how it'll impact writers and people in the humanities space?
yeah, sure. This is a great question. This is also a very big debate, and I come partly from the content publishing world too. I think the threat is very real, to be very honest, without dramatizing it or making blowing it over. The threat is real because we are seeing AI that is capable of cross connecting facts and language generation. I know that Google is working on a project as part of Google Brain, is working on a project that is going to be capable of doing exactly what you just mentioned, that being able to cross connect facts and put them together across disparate, disconnected areas. GPT-3 itself can do that if you spend long enough time with it. So the threat is very real. I think journalism, print, creative content writing will face a lot of pressure from artificial intelligence. I do not know how this will evolve. I think the strategy from a journalist's point of view could be to get ahead of things by learning how to use these tools to your advantage. So that is something that I do kind of often tell people to do. that get ahead of AI by learning how to use AI for your advantage. By, for example, a very good simple example is Grammarly, right? So Grammarly is a great tool because it doesn't fully use AI, but it is almost close to that in a general availability. So you can write more content and write better content. And rather than saying that I will do everything myself, just write a lot of content and use Grammarly to do the heavy lift. Similarly, like let's assume a tool comes along, and there are such tools where they can generate the copy. So you can increase your capabilities by using AI to your advantage. I don't think you can compete with it in the sense, and none of us can compete with AI and say that, oh, it won't be able to do this for me. Like, I think it's not just journalists, by the way. Engineers, software engineers are on the same boat. Anybody who's in any kind of creative industry, unless they are like superlatively good, like they are Nobel Prize winners, or doing something super unique, then that is just unique to them, is under a direct attack from being replaced by AI. So
So what in your I mean, like you seem to have worked so much, Titash, with this and about the possibilities it holds, and the taking away of uh, jobs, etc. We've spoken a lot about jobs being impacted by the use of AI. So do schools, in the schools who are moving away from uh, the skills which, I mean, like building up to examinations, passing examinations, etc. If we move the focus to um, um, all the creative fields, you are talking about creativity in writing, in producing content, etc. Even so, but here I want to ask, in actual creative things, which we find village folk doing, which we find, so to be for children to have and develop skills which help to expand those
yeah,
areas of human
yeah.
life and existence. Is that what we ought to be moving towards?
Yeah, so I mean that's a great point, ma'am, and I think that you've hit the nail on the head. I think we've, in our country especially, moved a lot away from those things. In fact, including me, like in my generation, there was this great move towards away from physically intense things, like things that involve your hands, and going out there and doing things, towards things that are more on the desk, computer, pen, paper, etc. And that's just how our society evolved in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. But I think there is a, I don't know if you want to completely go that path, but there is a very, very important and almost mission critical role that schools play of making sure that high degree of motor skill involved things are taught. I mean, if you look at societies that are doing that, like if you look at
Yeah,
Germany as an example, it's a great example of how there is a huge investment into developing motor skills and applying that. A lot of Europe, on that matter. So yeah, we should do that. And when I was in school, like at least in fifth grade, we had things like woodwork, we had things like metal craft, and those things eventually faded away because they were under glorified and thought to be not great. But I think we need to really have a strong narrative of bringing those back and making people capable of doing that. So that's
yeah.
really important.
So basically, moving, the importance of preparing for a job rather than that, to prepare children, of course, firstly, to become totally independent learners and be
Yeah,
able to upskill themselves as the situation demands,
yeah,
and also uh, to not be dependent on jobs others can give them.
yeah,
They create their
exactly.
own
Yeah. So I think that's why.
contribution to the society.
Yeah, that's exactly, and that is why when we were thinking about what to call, that is why we chose the name adaptive, because that is what people need to be. There is no predicting. There are few outcomes we can predict of what the future of work and society will be, but nobody really knows. So we have to be adaptive, and part of adaptiveness is knowing what to learn, when to learn, and having some basic skills. Like we say sometimes, right, when we are having a fun moment, that, oh, we should just learn how to farm and go out in the village, but it's not actually a joke. It's a
Yeah.
reality. We need to be capable and self-reliant and be able to
Yeah.
do certain things ourselves, because that's how society. And there are other trends. It's not just about AI. There are other macro and microeconomic trends that are happening in parallel. So what you are saying is right. Being able to learn new things, being agile, being open to new experiences, and being able to,
Resilient.
yeah, resilient, and not looking for a job per se, but livelihood on their own is what is really important.
So going back to what Shweta spoke about, I mean, there is a lot of human touch and thought that a particular journalist would, you know, go into while collecting information about a certain aspect of what's happening in the society. So, how will AI take and put that in? It will only pour out what it has been trained for, which are thoughts which have happened earlier.
Yeah, but if you think about it, if you really blow that up at a scale unimaginable for all of us, you probably are looking at all possible permutations and combinations potentially in the realm of human imagination. Like, if you really blow up the permutations to a really very large number, almost the size of the planet. So we are talking of every language, every word ever printed and written, every book that ever exists. You take all of that information and you push it into a machine, then that becomes a very narrow window, right? Because you can get pretty close. We are seeing that already. So to answer that, so WuDao, the model that is competing with GPT-3 and is 10x better, has, and the Chinese are pretty interesting, right? Like they are actually like always trying to show that, and they are really very, very far ahead, because the number of papers that China is pushing into the technology world is mind-bogglingly huge. So WuDao has trained what is known as the first virtual student. So the AI has created a student that is now enrolled in the Tsinghua University as a regular candidate and is learning higher degrees of, and is fully capable of having conversations. So if you Google WuDao virtual student, you will find that uh, a lot of information around that. Part of it is making a statement. Part of it is China saying, we're there and we are ahead of you guys, and it really is there. But part of it is also an indicator of what you just asked. What about sentient information? What about inherently human information? So those barriers are getting broken repeatedly. And if you take a hard lens to it, you probably will say this is an AI, this is a human. But most people in an average world, like if you look at journalism, most print journalism, the way it is heading from an economic perspective and other things, a print editor will say, you know what, I don't have to, I mean, and my apologies to journalists in here in the call, I don't mean any offense, but most or business people will say, you know what, if it is good enough and I can get to save a payroll, I might as well do it because, my business is down. Like, that's what it boils down to, right? Like literally all the time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Professor Saxena has a question in the chat, which is, he says cognitive/creative/collaborative jobs of the future. That's fine, but they're going to constitute only a very small proportion of jobs. The majority of jobs, if handled by AI, will leave very little for humans. So how will the digital divide play out in that scenario?
So I unfortunately don't have an answer to this, because I only know of possible outcomes, and there are far smarter people than me who are trying to solve for this. One thought is that we will have universal basic income. That's on the table more and more, because it is looking likely that in the next 2-3 decades we may not have enough jobs as many people, but we will have more enough wealth. And maybe that's a good way of looking at AI, that there is really no reason for everybody to go to work 9 to 5. Maybe people can do other things and society can universally take care of all of us. But that's a very complex and debatable question. The other way to look at it is probably governments will step in and say that, you know what, beyond this, we are not going to let you automate. That is a possibility. I don't know if that's good or bad. The third is that we will do things that are more physical, practical, human. We will need to train more people to be more creative. Creativity is not a realm of just a few people. Like, we just, the way we have created an army of coders, it is not unthinkable to create an army of people who are actually workers in the physical sense of the word. We can grow food, we can do other things. There are so many other things to do. We only seem to look at jobs as this thing where we go into an AC office and sit in front of a chair, on a desk and a chair. But that's not the definition of a job. Necessarily doesn't have to be. We can be teachers, we can be healthcare workers, we can be caregivers, we can be food growers, we can be drone flyers if people want to be in the tech. But that's a hugely in demand thing, and that is purely motor skill, and the ability to be outdoors, etc. And that, by the way, is a very big industry. Drone flying is going to need a lot of people because that's going to grow in leaps and bounds. So yeah, I mean, those are some of the answers. So going out there and doing things is 100 times more important than learning how to code. And I bring this up again and again because especially in our society, especially in Bangalore, we have this unhealthy obsession with coding. So I want to kind of bring that up because I feel strongly about it. So
yeah, this is absolutely fascinating. I think we should probably have another session in a couple of months, which is like V2.
This is all very exciting and scary. And I mean, being a coder myself, being a parent, and really keen on exploring the education space in future for my career. It is all a mixed set of emotions here, but a very, very insightful session. Thank you so much for this, Titash and Ryan.
Thanks
Definitely something that we'll explore more here. I mean, we do build these models as part of our job on a day-to-day basis, where we sort of predict when the order will reach the customer, etc. So, you know, this side of AI is very interesting to know about.
Thanks, Arpita. Yeah, that's it is very exciting, but it's also very scary. And I think it is definitely, like as Titash was saying, the Photoshop moment, right? Like all of us working in education are basically like the Kodak of the 1980s, right? And and it's like, it's kind of like up to us as to which way we want to head. So yeah, totally. Dipayan, you want to say something?
Hi Titash. Hi, this is Dipayan from your Hyderabad days.
Yeah, hi, how are you? Good to see you.
Hi, I'm doing good, and good to see you too. So I just had one simple question, though it was discussed with Madam Chadha when she was speaking. Like, I have an 11-year-old daughter, like a normal child, naughty, above average at school. So what should be the top 4 or 5 skills which I should now try to inculcate so that by another 10 years, she's ready for the job market? She's somewhat fitting into the scheme of things then.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the top skill is, this came up in our last conversation too, Ryan. The top skill is just letting kids go out and play as much as they can, because on the playground is where they will learn the skills of creativity, collaboration, and communication with, and learning to solve problems through in unknown situations. I think more and more, this is becoming the focal point of especially younger kids. So kids who are in colleges, they already have a sense of urgency. So, there's not much time, but kids who are in the 11, 12 years of age, learning sports, like I think we need to really as a society think about, can we do more in sports, because it is so underrepresented, right? And are we not missing out there? Can we do more in performing arts? Can we, and even if we don't think of this as, like, if enough parents started doing this, it would become an industry on its own. The only reason it is not an industry in India is because enough parents aren't doing that. So
it's changing slowly but surely.
yeah, so I think that would be my most important, like, sort of almost like an appeal to people. Like, I don't presume to say it's an advice, it's an appeal that we really need to change the way we look at education and what kids should learn, and that should be more out on the fields, on the and then not in front of computers.
Thanks, man. Very insightful session. Thanks to you and Brian. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Titash, Ritika here.
Hi.
So what I hear you say is, sports, because children have to learn to collaborate, to figure out, solutions to problems that are not pre-existing, but on the spot, right? And that's basically emotional intelligence, right? That what you're leading to? And that's going to be most important. And then they'll figure out what's best to do in their lives. Like they could be, and all these professions that you talked about are so positive. In fact, they are positive for the society, and they're not all consuming. Like, for example, some of our jobs are so all consuming and not value adding.
Yeah, that's a great point about emotional intelligence, and I'm glad you brought it up. I remember a conversation that I had. It was a casual, like a couple of months back, a casual conversation with investor, where he made this point that he's seeing, and he's a global sort of impact investor. So he sees, societies and children across Africa, and then various places. And he made this point that it seems likely that kids in, and it's counterintuitive, but it seems likely that kids growing up in low technology, privileged society environments are more likely to succeed in the future than kids living in high-tech, high-privileged societies, because these other kids will have empathy, and that is one thing that AI will not have. And that will be the most in-demand skill of the future, the ability to empathize and have a high emotional intelligence, which none of our children are likely to have unless we actively intervene.
So you spoke about the attitude of parents. What I can see as an educator is most parents are so bothered with marks, because marks is what is the ultimate aim, what the outcome that people are looking for. So if we can do away with that, like you said, with AI stepping in, there doesn't seem to be much sense for exams. So that would be the breakaway point, of the focus moving to more humane things,
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, that is really something that should probably happen at an industry level at the with educators, especially you and Ryan and other people at your level. But it is something that needs to happen sooner than later.
Yeah, and I mean, just lately I've been, doing a lot of reading, and there's so much literature out there, with supporting the fact that grades and marks and all of that, not only do they not have a positive effect on, things like confidence, self-esteem, etc., but they actually detract from learning outcomes. So you actually end up learning less as a person when you're catering only to getting a mark, because you're just so focused on one thing, whereas learning is supposed to be this multi-dimensional, activity which takes you in all different directions. But when you're aiming for a grade, even if you want to go in a direction, you're like, no, I need to study. I'm just going to study this, right? Yeah, super interesting. I think let's wrap up, Titash. Thank you so much for taking time out and to do this. I'm putting it out there right now. I want to do another one in a couple of months, which can go deeper into maybe, some of the things that we've spoken about today.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining in. This was incredibly eye-opening. There's so many directions in which my mind is going now. And there've been so many parents and educators on this call, so I'm sure we can do a lot of interesting things going forward. So yeah, with that, thank you everyone. Thanks so much again, Titash. Been awesome. Hope to catch up with you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for this conversation and this excellent session. Let's definitely keep this dialogue going. I think this is more than anything else, it's important to have this conversation more frequently and actively amongst different groups.